Welcome to another edition of NEWSLINE360. I'm your host, Andre Hugh. In this program, we discuss and we interview newsmakers from across the Caribbean on the topical issues of the day. And with us this week is no stranger to the program, Mr. Peter Wickham, political analyst and based in Barbados. He'll be speaking to us on the latest happenings in politics across the region, but most notably the geopolitical issues that have been happening. The most recent CARICOM heads of government meeting held in St. Kitts, which, of course, you know, the chairman is the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Terence Drew. We'll be talking about the outcome of that meeting and the aftermath, because a lot has happened since that meeting. Peter, pleasure to have you. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be with you again, Andre. We have a lot to discuss today.
Indeed, we do have a lot to discuss. All right, let's start with the CARICOM meeting, because that, of course, is the most topical issue. The heads of government would have met. Quite a lot of fireworks went off in the very first day, the opening session, and most notably by the address made by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, where she had some unsavory things, well, not say unsavory, but some not so good things, let me put it that way then, more diplomatically, about CARICOM and our issues with CARICOM. Let me ask you, first of all, your thoughts on her address and whether you felt that set the tone for the remainder of the meetings.
Andre, thanks. No, I think that you used the correct word initially, unsavory. There's always an attempt in these matters to go for diplomatic speak. She did not go for diplomatic speak. She went for the jugular, and I think that we need to characterize it in kind. You know, that it was a highly inappropriate conversation that she was attempting to have. My sense was that she came to the CARICOM meeting, she threw an incendiary device in the room, and left, quite frankly. Normally we have the third day would be the family meeting. The second day was the conversation with Marco Rubio. It was clear that she came to soften up the pitch, so to speak, for the Rubio meeting, and essentially to send a message to Donald Trump to suggest that, you know, I'm going to take care of these guys. You do what you have to do. And ultimately, she rolled the pitch for Rubio the next day. And then she left. There was no opportunity for CARICOM heads to engage her one-on-one in the family day. Look, we understand where her allegiances lie and where her interests lie. She's made no bones about it. And frankly, we can see that she's been honest in that regard. So let's call it what it was. It was an unsavory conversation. It was an unsavory lob of balls into that environment. It was certainly not CARICOM's finest hour, and I think it continues to be unfortunate in my mind that this is the way that she operates. But ultimately, you know, as a head of state, she has every right to do so. I do want to congratulate St. Kitts and Nevis for hosting what I thought was an excellent meeting otherwise. The presentation, certainly the manner in which the chairman handled himself, was a credit to St. Kitts and Nevis. And what I thought was particularly good about the other heads was the fact that none of them attempted to stoop to that level. And ultimately, Kamala Persad-Bissessar would have stood alone, as she did in one of the photographs, from the other heads in terms of their willingness to understand and discuss, you know, the diplomatic niceties and to observe the diplomatic niceties. She, however, didn't. But I commend the other heads for not, you know, going low, as Michelle Obama would say, and I congratulate them for that.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about that, though, would you say that the outcome of the meeting, or rather of the opening ceremony, let's put it that way, and the statements made by the Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister, did that, in your view, reveal any rifts within CARICOM? Because most commentators and pundits would have looked at that to say, well, you know, this shows CARICOM is divided and there's no unity in CARICOM. Juxtapose that, of course, to the opening statements made by the Prime Minister of Jamaica, where some outlets believe that he was sort of softening the pitch for Kamala's presentation.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, we have differences of opinion in CARICOM, and I guess the benefit I have of being close to Europe and the European Union it gives you an understanding that in regional organizations there are always these types of views and opinions. And if you look at the role of Turkey within the EU conversation, or certainly in terms of NATO, it's a terse one. It's a difficult one, and within families, you always have members who are less happy than others. So that part doesn't surprise me, but I think that we needed to manage those issues well. One of the things which is clear to me is that one of the major issues in CARICOM is this huge trade imbalance. The fact that the CARICOM is a trade community. The benefits are exclusively exploited by, or almost exclusively exploited by, Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. Trinidad and Tobago, no less. It is one of the key beneficiaries of that aspect of CARICOM. I'm always fascinated at the fact that, we talk about the differences in terms of foreign policy, which is not one of the key objectives within the single market and economy. But nonetheless, that is singled out as being an indication that CARICOM is so divided. And the issue that we should probably be divided on is this trade chasm that exists between Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of us. That was not even discussed. It's clear that they're happy to have that type of thing continue, while for them, you're making an issue of something which is a non-issue. And my feeling is that for many years, we have existed on the assumption that the Caribbean region would be a zone of peace. It's one of the few things that we've agreed on. As of late, now we're told that that's no longer the case because Trinidad and Tobago is uncomfortable with that. That to me is not a major issue, because that represents a difference of opinion that has emerged with the leader, and frankly will die with the leader. My feeling is that as long as Prime Minister Pasar Besessa continues to be Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, we will have those views and opinions. But, we've had stronger leanings towards CARICOM before her. And my assumption is that at some point in time, she will leave office, whether this time or next time. And at that point, CARICOM relations will return to normal. And what I found interesting is that the fact that none of the other leaders seem to feel that we are so fractured and so bruised and so broken that they would need to bring it to the table. I look at Friday, for example, who probably had good reason to feel that the Barbados delegation acted in a way that was not favorable to him, in as much as it is well known that canvassers from the Barbados Labour Party were active in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But he, however, brought no issue to CARICOM in that regard. In Trinidad and Tobago's case, there was no such activity within Trinidad and Tobago in the last election, but yet still Trinidad and Tobago is bringing an issue on behalf of countries that are not raising it. Guyana, for example, Guyana has a border dispute with Venezuela. Guyana has not brought that matter to the table of CARICOM. However, Trinidad and Tobago is seeking to suggest that we have behaved in a way that was not supportive of Guyana in the past. Guyana was in the room and Guyana said nothing in that regard. So I think that what we don't have is we don't have a major fracture. I think we have a difference of opinion with one person. And the question is, how exactly do we manage that difference of opinion going forward? But in the past, CARICOM has had major issues. I mean, we went through the West Indies Federation, which broke up. The formation of the OECS and CARICOM single market was challenging to the extent that those trade issues I spoke of forced a divide within the region, where the OECS states were uncomfortable associating with the larger states, the MDCs, because they felt that they would be taken advantage of, which is, for all intents and purposes, what's happening now. We've had mechanisms like the CDB that have come into that conversation with a specific intent of developing the OECS economies to be able to be on par. So I'm saying that if these are fundamental issues, we've responded to them in the past. I think that this stuff is not fundamental about it. You're looking at a person who has a different view, and that can be managed going forward.
Now, with that in mind, and bearing that in mind, or looking at where we are with that situation is concerned, how do we go forward? Because obviously, what is divided, or what has presented this difference of opinion, to use your words, is a geopolitical issue which is playing out even as we speak. Just this past weekend, we had the Shield of the Americas summit held in Doral, Florida, where President Trump invited some leaders from CARICOM and some from Latin America, others from Latin America. So a selected few, so to speak, to have this summit and to have this meeting of the minds, obviously leaving out a large share of CARICOM leaders out of that picture. Clearly, this geopolitical issue and how we are treating it and how the America is treating the region is certainly playing its role. How do we proceed from this?
Well, I don't know that we need to proceed. I mean, it's not the first time it happened. Some time ago, President Trump invited, in those days, the flavor of the month was St. Lucia and Jamaica. So this current Jamaican Prime Minister, along with the former St. Lucian Prime Minister, were invited up to Florida for a meeting that was supposed to boost trade and investment. At the time, there was concern in the region that there was a feeling that some leaders were crossing the line and that others were not invited to the table, and it wasn't a CARICOM meeting. President Trump picked and chose who he thought he wanted to have at his house, and they went and they had lunch with him. This is presented as being something slightly different in that it's something called a Shield of the Americas. But in the same way that on the last occasion, trade initiatives and investment initiatives were announced, which never materialized. In this instance, the announcement doesn't appear to have anything in it of any substance. I'm hearing that he's prepared to shoot criminals out of the sea if they so decide, because they have these accurate missiles that can shoot drug traffickers and criminals down. Presumably, Prime Minister Prasad Bissessa is comfortable with that, because she hasn't seemed to be uncomfortable with what is perceived by everyone else to be extrajudicial killing. So maybe she will call on those resources. But I listened to it with interest, and I'm not sure what the Shield is, what it represents. Fundamentally, the idea that there's something in it for us, there doesn't seem to be anything in it for them other than the fact that they get to have President Trump shoot these missiles into the region to deal with drug traffickers if they so choose. So I would say that the substance of this is similar to the substance of the previous initiative, and the fact that we are not at the table, to me, is really neither here nor there. Look, we have objectives that we need to advance as a region, and I don't believe that meeting retards or deters us in any way from advancing on those issues. And I wouldn't lose too much sleep over the fact that we weren't present today, or alternatively that we weren't present on the previous occasion. Right now, there's a lot on Trump's plate, and I think that issues of us and our association with him are going to slip in terms of its importance, in their importance.
Yeah. All right. Well, at this point, we'll take a break and we'll come right back. When we come back, we will talk some more about the CARICOM meeting. We'll look more in depth into what was actually discussed, and then we can put together our conclusion on the whole CARICOM summit. You're watching Newsline 360 here on TVC Channel 40 and the TVC Plus streaming app. We'll be right back.
Stay connected to the best of local and Caribbean content anywhere, anytime with the TVC Plus app, the official app of TVC Channel 40. With the TVC Plus app, you can watch TVC Channel 40 live, catch every episode of your favorite shows on demand, watch exclusive pay-per-view content, listen to Voice of the Caribbean radio, and watch and read SKN Newsline. The TVC Plus app is available on all your devices. On the Google Play Store, search TVC and the plus sign. In the Apple App Store, type the words TVC Plus. And we're also available on the Amazon App Store for Fire TV and Fire Stick devices. Search the words TVC Plus. Download today and take TVC Channel 40 wherever you go. The TVC Plus app. Stream, watch, enjoy.
At The Cable, we believe in giving back because when our community thrives, we all do. That's why, as a company, we make it our mission to touch the lives of everyone in St. Kitts. We spearheaded the renovation of JNF Hospital lobby to ensure better care for all. The Cable sponsors free Wi-Fi in every community center across St. Kitts, so no one is left behind in an increasingly connected world. We stand with communities through every moment, big or small, in culture, education, youth development, and more. Y a ti también, comunidad latina. Cuenta con nosotros. Estamos con ustedes. And when it comes to customer service, we set the standard. We're just a call, click, or visit away because you matter to us. Join the company that truly cares. The Cable, more than service. We're family. Somos familia. And we're proud to always give more where it matters.
King James is a soca artist out of the beautiful island of Sunshine City, St. Martin. I love music, grew up around music, and I just love to entertain people. Got started in music from a young age. My creative process is one, I would get a vibe, get a melody. That's why having talent behind us makes such a difference. They're not just our local telecom. They're supporting local artists, giving us the support and tools to keep creating and sharing without limits. And with Telem's new internet speeds, I can upload my files and tracks in seconds, send big files to producers overseas, and even live stream without worrying about buffering. But Telem has always played a role when it comes to young talent on the island. I would actually go as far to say this. Without Telem, there probably wouldn't be a King James right now. Telem is showcasing that St. Martin can compete on any level. They are investing in us, in our creativity, and in our future. And that's something I'm proud to be a part of.
And we're back here on Newsline360 and TVC Channel 40 and those watching on the TVC Plus app. I'm your host, Andre Huey, and I'm joined by Peter Wickham, political analyst, as we're discussing the role of, or rather the outcome of the CARICOM summit, which took place recently in St. Kitts and Nevis. All right, Peter, so we'll move away now from the opening session itself, and we'll take a look at what actually else transpired, the outcome. The main thing seemed to have been Cuba, seemed to have been the focus on Cuba, and that humanitarian aid will be sent to Cuba in collaboration with efforts from Mexico. But most of the other pressing issues, we in the media at least, we didn't get any straightforward answers. Your thoughts on the outcome and the communique that CARICOM would have issued?
Yeah, because the reality, and I saw both the announcement and also the communique, and also I listened to some of the concerns that were raised by members of the floor. The press is concerned about the fracture within CARICOM. The press is concerned about Kamala Perssad's comments, and the press was concerned that there was no clear, direct response to that. The press is also concerned about Haiti. The press is concerned about Cuba, and I think that those three major issues are the basis of disappointment that the press corps has, and that I have, quite frankly. My thing is that the conversation about the first issue, which is Kamala Perssad's issue, that was not an agenda item. And there was not an attempt within the agenda to resolve her matters, because her matters were something that she didn't bring formally and say, let's make this an agenda item. She basically chose it as a forum to vent her concerns. So I don't really know that any member of CARICOM needed to respond to it. The Brett Thomas issue, which was one of the things that she raised, quite frankly, was somewhat offensive. It was a matter of Trinidad and Tobago's national security, which at the time Barbados believed it was trying to advance. My question is, how does something like that get onto the CARICOM agenda? Why would she be writing the Secretary General of CARICOM regarding a matter which is a matter of national security? When she's Prime Minister of a country, and if she wants, she can take certain initiatives to investigate locally and find out what happened. And understand that what the government of Barbados did was not kidnap a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. The government of Barbados was trying to be true to the spirit of an agreement which it had with the police force of Trinidad and Tobago to help them execute their own particular interests. So that's one side. But if you look at the other things that she raised, as I said, it's not an agenda item. And the fact that they didn't respond to it, I think is good, because you can't have one member who has grievances defining the agenda of a conversation among a group in a situation where she knows the procedures for putting things on the agenda and did not seek to do so. In relation to the other two issues, Cuba and Haiti, I have a long held view that what goes on in both Cuba and Haiti is quite sad. The Haiti situation is a humanitarian disaster that is largely caused by several factors, many of which are historical. The Cuba situation is far more recent, and I think it has a lot to do with an American embargo and an issue which the Americans have had with Cuba going back to the 1960s. But what is more important to me is that in both instances, I'm not thoroughly convinced that the Caribbean could do anything about it. I do agree that they're both appalling, and I do agree that we have done too little, but I would also agree that we have done essentially what we could under the circumstances. When you look at the Haitian earthquake, and the fact that thereafter we were called upon to respond, And what could we do? We send clothes and we send some money and whatnot. But the enormity of the issue was one that we could not respond to, quite frankly. And as a result, we fell short. In this instance, now we are being told that Cuba needs, that Haiti needs security services, and it needs to be able to get its feet back on the ground in terms of establishing its politics and concern. We have had an initiative where we've had former prime ministers forming a group and trying to see what it can do in that regard. But it has been an enormous task, and I think that you're looking at a population of several million versus countries that have very, very limited means and ability to respond. So I think that we did what we could in terms of Haiti. As far as Cuba is concerned, I think that the American embargo on Haiti is offensive. On Cuba is offensive. I think that we have said this at various General Assemblies of United Nations. For years, we have been saying it. I think up to the last one, you can recall that both Prime Minister Gonzalez, as he was at the time, and Prime Minister Mottley, in their contribution, said that they thought the time had come, that the embargo needed to be ended, and the embargo was unfortunate. What we have seen subsequently is a strengthening of it, where the United States is tightening the screws. The United States is also tightening the screws on our relations with Cuba, and I think that the whole thing is really quite offensive. But my question is, what can we do? Marco Rubio came, and the conversation was framed in the context of the status quo in Cuba. Now, does this status quo means the status quo regarding the United States' attitude towards Cuba, or does this status quo means the state of democracy in Cuba? My sense is that if we are to condemn the state of democracy in Cuba, that's a pretty rich argument because we have relations with China. I don't recall them having general elections anytime recently. And I think that this whole idea that the absence of elections in Cuba is a problem for us is something that we need to disabuse our minds of. Cuba has been a friend to the Caribbean. He's been a friend to St. Kitts and Nevis. Your prime minister was trained in Cuba. We have had doctors and nurses and vets trained in Cuba over the years in Barbados, and we have had situations where they have come to our assistance in situations where the United States of America did not. We cannot turn our back on them. Having said that, I don't really know how much more we can do, because as a region, we will continue to say that the attitude of the United States needs a lot to be desired. But ultimately, what can we do to change it, especially in a situation where they are tightening the screws on us? And I'm thinking if you want to make the situation in Cuba better tomorrow, then let Cuba buy oil and other resources that it needs, because they're not starved for cash. The problem is an embargo. I don't know how much more directly we could put that in a communique. We have chosen diplomatic language that speaks to status quo, and I think that if you read between the lines properly, it's clear that the status quo is caused by one thing, which is the attitude of the United States of America. And I don't think that we are in a position to change either of those. So I was not unhappy with the communique coming out of CARICOM, because I think that it said we will deal with issues which were on the agenda that were to be resolved, and we've made efforts in those regards, and that we are going to try to address issues that we would love to resolve, but are certainly not in a position to do anything significant about at this point in time. And that's where Cuba and Haiti come into the picture. So there was a distance between what the press wanted action on and what CARICOM was in a position to do. And I am sympathetic to the heads in a situation where, all of us are grappling with issues and taking away visas from or threatening to take away visas from Antigua and Dominica, and in St. Lucia and things like that. They're telling us that we can't have Cuban doctors and nurses operating in the Caribbean. But yet still the expectation of the media corps is that we need to be able to tell Marco Rubio which God is serving, which is a difficult challenge for us to be able to respond to.
And that's a very good point, because one of the things that, and I think we had this discussion the last time we had this interview, is CARICOM's or the regional leaders' response, or whether they should stand up to America. We saw where the Prime Minister of Jamaica, for example, in his statements about Cuba at CARICOM, was met with backlash, for lack of a better term, by U.S. congressmen who felt that his statements were out of place and that consequences will be in place for Jamaica. And now not long after, we saw where Jamaica just recently ended its Cuban medical program with Cuba. Caribbean leaders are being called to task. They're being called to stand up to America. But at what cost? How can leaders juggle the need to stand up and represent their country, so to speak, but at the same time not put their country's interests at jeopardy?
Yeah, and that's a question that's difficult and one that I don't know that I can answer, because a prime minister like Gaston Brown, for example, has found, and your prime minister as well in St. Kitts and Nevis, have found the citizenship by investment to be very useful. Citizenship by investment is building an airport in Dominica that will greatly access give them access to advantages that they could otherwise have had. I mean, I watched Prime Minister Gonzalez in St. Vincent and the Grenadines struggle to finance and build his airport, getting into bed and forming alliances with all kinds of people, including the late Gaddafi, to be able to raise the necessary funding to build this airport. And it took an enormous lift. Dominica has done it far more easily through the citizenship by investment facility. There's no question that airport will enhance the GDP of Dominica significantly, and it will be extremely important. I mean, if you look at the way that Argyle International has taken off and has helped build out tourism in St. Vincent and the Grenadines enormously. So my thing is, if a leader decides this is what I want to do to be able to advance my country, but yet still, when I attempt to do it, I'm thrown a roadblock and people tell me you should not be in bed with a citizenship by investment program because we do not think it's a good idea for you. And then I say to you, well, how else am I going to finance my development? And they say, well, there's agriculture, there's tourism, you can look to those things. And the facilities are not provided. The Canadians, the CEDA was very opposed to, and even the CDB, to getting involved in the Argyle International project because it was not consistent with their own expectations of what St. Vincent and the Grenadines needed to do. St. Vincent and the Grenadines was able to do it notwithstanding. And I'm saying that this is a challenge, and this is the reason that I do not envy the position of leaders in the Caribbean, where you have narrow alternatives. I mean, agriculture was pretty much dead in the region for a long time, and let's face it. Trinidad, St. Vincent, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Antigua took the bold step of wrapping up their sugar industries and looking towards other things. So what exactly are you supposed to do to build out your economy? Citizenship by investment has become a route that has been very good for several countries that have been engaged in citizenship by investment. In terms of the St. Kitts and Nevis national debt, it was CBI that pretty much raised it when it was ballooning to unprecedented proportions. But what has happened as a result is that you have a negative backlash that has thrown this whole idea of the legitimacy of the program into question. So I don't really know that I have the answer, frankly, and I am sympathetic because I think that leaders have a difficult challenge. People need nurses and doctors, they need teachers, they need money to pay these things. They want development, they want airports. People want to be able to invite tourists to fly from London to Dominica to enjoy a holiday. If those persons are forced to transit another country, they will not do so in many instances because that is the nature of tourism. But yet still, when leaders say, I will try to finance it in the way that I can, there are roadblocks that are thrown up and the suggestion being made that these leaders are evil and corrupt. I looked at this, the investment of Venezuela in West Indies Oil Company in Antigua and Barbuda, which was something that appeared to be a good idea at the time for the development of Antigua. And now we're being told that Prime Minister Gaston Brown is in bed with Maduro and that this is a suggestion of corruption. And I am not understanding where that conversation came from. Because my thing is, you make investment decisions at a particular point in time that appear to be in the interest of the development of your own country. And that's exactly what they did. And, it's interesting. Prime Minister Baldwin Spencer, before him, took similar initiatives in terms of the Petro-Carib and the relationship that it appeared to give. And Petro-Carib was quite generous to Caribbean countries in terms of providing us with concessional rates on fuel and oil. Something which, certain other OPEC countries would never have done. And at the time, it seemed like a good idea. And I'm just fascinated at the way in which these things are now being distorted and presented as being, these bases of very evil, corrupt initiatives, which they are not, in my view.
All right, Peter, hold that point. We have a last segment. Quickly, we want to switch the tempo a bit to talk a bit about the Barbados elections. We hadn't had a chance to talk about that, so we'll talk about that after the break. You're watching Newsline 360 right here on TVC Channel 40 and the TVC Plus app.
King James is a soca artist out of the beautiful island of Sunshine City, St. Martin. I love music, grew up around music, and I just love to entertain people. Got started in music from a young age. My creative process is one, I would get a vibe, get a melody. That's why having talent behind us makes such a difference. They're not just our local telecom. They're supporting local artists, giving us the support and tools to keep creating and sharing without limits. And with Telem's new internet speeds, I can upload my files and tracks in seconds, send big files to producers overseas, and even live stream without worrying about buffering. But Telem has always played a role when it comes to young talent on the island. I would actually go as far to say this. Without Telem, there probably wouldn't be a King James right now. Telem is showcasing that St. Martin can compete on any level. They are investing in us, in our creativity, and in our future. And that's something I'm proud to be a part of.
All right, don't miss News Desk. Weekdays at 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. on TVC. Sync Kids to the World, now streaming everywhere.
And we're back here on NEWSLINE360. The final segment, we've been talking about CARICOM and all the different things that have been happening in the region. We're going to sort of shift tones a bit to talk about one of the most recent things that have happened, the Barbados elections. Mia Mottley of the Barbados Labour Party winning a third consecutive term and a third consecutive term unchallenged, winning all seats in Barbados. That's unprecedented, Peter. And maybe you could shed some light if this has ever happened in Barbados' history or any other country. I know in Grenada they've had a situation before where they also won all the seats in Parliament. Dr. Keith Mitchell would have done that twice, but not 3 consecutive terms. Why is the Barbados Labour Party and Mia Mottley able to pull off this amazing political feat?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think that you grounded the conversation correctly in the Grenada example. Keith Mitchell has done it 3 times, but he has not done it 3 times consecutively. And I always argue that it's easier to achieve an outcome like that, once, because lightning strikes once, but seldom ever does it strike 3 times in the same place. And that's exactly what has happened to Prime Minister Mottley. So certainly we have to start by congratulating her for achieving that, which no other leader in the Caribbean has achieved by being able to win all seats 3 times. Bear in mind that it's easier to do it in a country that has less seats. So it's not likely to happen in either Trinidad and Tobago or Jamaica. One of the challenges of the Westminster system imposed on small territories like this is that you will have like St. Kitts and Nevis, where the Labour Party would have won all the seats, all 8 on the mainland. And then you would have had similar situations in Antigua and St. Lucia where almost all of the seats have been won. And it can happen more easily when you have, let's say, 15 seats. In Barbados' case, 30 seats is still a relatively small number. In terms of winning all 30 seats, as I said, there's a Westminster peculiarity that creates that. But in terms of the more substantive issue, generally speaking, in elections in the Caribbean, you win the first one, and then you lose, you win the first one as a party, and then you invariably lose support thereafter. And there are very few occasions in the region where a party in power has actually increased its majority, because usually the trend is that you would lose support and certainly seats after the first occasion. In her case, she has won the same number of seats and her party support has remained relatively stable. In both instances, there were statistically insignificant declines, but ultimately to be able to retain the same level of support across the board in 3 elections is unusual. And there have been occasions in the Caribbean. Dominica, for example, has had occasions on which it has gained, while being in office, they have actually gained support twice. It's happened in St. Vincent. It's happened in St. Lucia just recently, and that's a significant achievement. But generally speaking, it's a downward trajectory. The reason why it happens is simple. It all has everything to do with the opposition. And invariably, when you see a leader romping home in that way, certainly the leader's excellence is good and the party's excellence is good in terms of being able to manage the issues. But I think the part that we don't always realize is that it's not just about Mia Mottley, it's not just about Ralph Gonzalez, it's not just about Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre. It's about a situation in which you have an alternative which people just find is completely disastrous. Mia Mottley's first 30 Love came at a time when we had just experienced the worst governance that we have ever had in our history. We call it the 10 lost years. And frankly, what she did after was essentially present Barbados with governance that we hadn't seen for some time. And the reality is that on each occasion, the Democratic Labour Party alternative has presented itself in a way that didn't appear to be significantly different from what it was when it left office. And as a result, it has been rejected in the same way. The suggestion is that if the opposition did better, then we wouldn't have had that situation. My feeling is that it's the same thing in St. Lucia. Prime Minister Chastanet was excused from office. Prime Minister Pierre was presented and seemed to have done reasonably well. In both instances, elections were called early, which gives you a strategic advantage. But I think in both instances, the critical thing is that the opposition was not in good shape. And if I recall, when I look back at the St. Kitts and Nevis scenario, when the Labour Party was doing so well over the years, it had everything to do with the fact that PAM didn't really live up to expectations. And I think that that's pretty much still the case in terms of the Labour Party's ability to triumph. So it has a lot to do with government, and it has a lot to do with Prime Minister Mottley. We shouldn't take that away. But the opposition is the missing link. That it has really been disastrous in the case of Barbados.
And what do you think now will be Mia's legacy? Winning 3 consecutive terms, winning all seats in all three elections. Now you have a mandate to really do a lot of the things that you didn't do in the past 2 terms. So what do you think should be her focus this term, and solidifying her legacy, so to speak?
Yeah. And the reality is that a lot of that legacy has already been solidified. When she came in on the first occasion, if you read the manifesto properly, she came in with the promise of buying 20 garbage trucks and 30 buses. And I mean, to be honest, when you look at the manifesto, there were a lot of low-hanging fruit. And she had this idea of a stability coming from, these mission-critical initiatives, all of which were achieved in under six or 8 months before COVID came. And one could argue that she set the bar relatively low for herself because the bar had already been set low in terms of the governance that we had in office. We had raw sewage flowing on the streets on the South Coast when she came into office. And one of her first things was that it should stop. And within a few days, it was stopped. And, the huge economic disaster that presented Barbados was, one could say, the main challenge in the first term, which was made worse by the fact that we had ashfall from St. Vincent, and we also had COVID in Barbados to change all of these realities. She immediately went into a structural adjustment program, and she changed that. We went from a situation in Barbados where we were paying 60 or 70 cents out of every dollar in debt service, to a situation now where that debt service component is I think is either 30 or 40 cents, which means that government has a lot more capacity to do things that they were able to do. I would argue that is her legacy. And, that is, one could say, an intangible to the extent that people can't see and touch it. And then what she did in the first term is that she gave us the removal of Lord Nelson, which was offensive to many of us, which was a physical change that came. She gave us a republic, and Barbados became the newest republic in the world. It's still the newest republic in the world because there's no other since Barbados. And making Rihanna a national hero and things of that nature are small parts of it. But I would say that the legacy has been pretty much solidified since 2018 for having done those things. And then she has built on it. So there are other, interesting things that we've seen, a communication strategy that takes government to people, in every parish, regularly 6 or 8 months, you have conversations with people at the national level where the Prime Minister, the members of cabinet and individuals come out and do town hall meetings. That's part of the legacy. Barbados's public transportation has been revolutionized by a fleet of electric buses. Initially, she promised 30. I think that right now they've delivered 130. That's part of the legacy. So the expectation of standing and waiting on a bus is changed significantly, which is something that has impacted positively on a lot of people that we're seeing. And now in this third term, she's promising infrastructure. The airport is supposed to be redeveloped. She's talking about building another highway and flyovers, which is part of the traffic management plan. And then there are other things which have been coming, like the whole international thing. It's hard to quantify that, but my sense is that this will be the term in which the international reputation of Barbados takes flight in ways which I think can be really quite interesting. The Bridgestone Initiative, which is about financing, is something which has taken interest, and my sense is that that will be further built out in this coming year. And then they're looking at other similar initiatives, which I think has essentially not only catapulted her into international spotlight, but will put Barbados in a favorable position where we are known and recognized and seen that we're going in a direction which is generally favorable.
Yep. Well, we'll have 5 more years to see how that will work out. But so far, from what you said, yeah, it has been outlined. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being on the show. Again, always a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure.
And that will do it for this edition of Newsline 360. I was your host, Andre here. Remember, you can watch this show again in its entirety by visiting our website, tvcplus.live, or downloading our TVC Plus app for Android and Apple devices. Thanks again for watching Newsline 360, and stay tuned to TVC Channel 40.